the very first time I ever saw you specifically, I'd never heard of you. And I'm watching Chris Leto's podcast. Like, I don't know, this must have been a year and a half ago or something. It was quite a while ago.
That's
And I
correct.
just, and this was honestly, you're way ahead of your time, because at this time, there weren't many stories out there about these USOs, underwater submerged objects. And all of a sudden I see this video, because I'm looking them up to make this other whatever thing I'm doing, and I'm looking for videos about this, and I come across your interview on Chris Leto's podcast talking about this experience that you had in service, right, in the 90s, I believe. I mean, you can correct me on all of this, and I'd like to just dive into that, because you had a USO experience really before anybody was talking about it. So I don't
Two
know
of
if
them.
you don't mind. Two of them. Okay,
Two of
see,
them.
this is new.
Yeah.
This is
So
new. Okay.
in the 90s, I did some work for the government that had me on the USS Hampton. And that is the beginning and the end of what I can tell you about what I was doing, except when we were in the middle of a downtime, we were down deep and moving. And all of a sudden, there was this rushing sound by the submarine. And it didn't disturb the water because we didn't feel get rustled around, but the senior master chief came out of sonar and said that something had gone by us that was huge, and it was moving, he thought, faster than the speed of sound in air, but it was so far underwater, it would nothing we know how to do on the earth can move an object underwater at that speed, because water is incompressible. You can't compress it. Okay. And the reason, if you try to go fast, because if it's incompressible, it cavitates and makes noise, which is how submarines find you. Okay. So anyway, and of course the sonar was there and we heard it. And that was, the captain said, say nothing. And we said nothing. And that was the end of it. I was curious, but not allowed to talk about it. And I heard nothing about it after we got off. But I'm telling you, it happened. All right. So in 2008, I was doing an operation, and I happened to be on the USS Blue Ridge, which is the flagship for the 7th Fleet, which is based in Yokosuka, Japan. And so I was on there for months. And whatever I'm doing, I can't say, but one time we were on our way from the Manila in the Philippines to Japan. And we happened to go through parts of a typhoon. And it was 90 knot winds and 40-foot seas. So we were pretty close to the eye. And these ships they just can go right through this stuff. So we went through it. And I decided to ride it out in the bridge so I could see what it was like. And I just stood against the wall and kept myself out of the way. But all of a sudden, I was looking out the windows front from the bridge and could see that the rain had stopped falling on the ship. And I said, "Are we in the eye?" And they went, "No." So that really piqued my curiosity. So I walked up toward a window and looked, and I could see a glow above the ship. I couldn't see what the glow was, but I could see the glow. And the glow was bigger than the ship. And all of a sudden, as if it knew I was looking, the glow got brighter and boom, it took off. And the rain returned. So I cannot say that I saw the craft, but I can tell you I saw the light, and the light covered the entire 400 or 300 feet or whatever that length that ship is, and we had no rain on us. And it must have been pretty wide too, because the winds were 90 knots, and it would have blown rain a long way, and I could not see any hitting the deck. And that only lasted a few seconds. And I said, "Did you guys see that?" And people went, "What?" And so whatever, and that was it. I mean, it was there and done in under 30 seconds. Why?
I mean, that's fascinating. Yeah, no, I mean, at that point, don't you think the rain's coming in sideways?
Yeah, you would have thought, but
almost.
nothing was hitting us.
Isn't that crazy? Like it's even stopping horizontal, like something this
Yeah.
globe. That's
I'm telling
fascinating.
you, it was even stopping wind from blowing rain in. So later
Yeah.
on, I happened to be with Tim Gallaudet and others in a meeting in a little conference in New York City run by Jay King and his friends. And Tim gave a talk, and talk to Tim, and says, I've been on the Hampton. And he went, wow, I was on the Hampton in 10 years after I had been in the Arctic. So he and we have kind of kinship because we've both been on the
Yeah.
same ship. And I says, Tim, look, I have this feeling, given the stories we're hearing and my own personal experiences, which I told him about, and said, it's my feeling and opinion, given what we're seeing and hearing, that if a ship of the Navy goes out on blue water, which means deep water, they have
Oh, okay.
experiences, almost 100% of them. And he says, yep, I think you're right. And he's an
Wow.
admiral in the Navy and was charged of weather for all the Navy when he was in the Navy. So and he spent
Yeah.
time on carriers and other ships. And I bet you when he was head of NOAA, he got pictures of craft from the NOAA satellites. I bet he did, but he didn't say.
Wow. I mean, he's since come forward since you first told, your story, right? And kind of in the face of USO, right? In a lot of ways, at least getting that term out and that this can exist below the water, and potentially even being an origin of where, right? Because we don't, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's a lot, right? Of how much of the ocean we've actually explored. I believe it's
Small percentage.
not, nothing,
We
right? Yeah,
know the
it's
moon better than we do the. We know the moon better than we do the ocean floor.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, exactly. I believe there's a whole I mean, I think they were saying in between Europe and right the eastern United States, there's like a whole continent underneath the ocean that we have yet to explore. That's just one of the things, like you said, right? So, yeah, I mean, I find that fascinating for sure. What is there anything? Because you're someone that had a high security clearance. You're on this mission, classified mission. You experience this USO and you tell Tim Gallaudet, is there any like, is he wanting to tell your story or anybody wanting to put your story out there in some way?
I think
Or
he's gathering his own stories, but he now knows mine. But what he is doing is he's told us where the one of the biggest secrets in the Navy is about their sensor systems. But big events are recorded. And Tim knows where the recordings are kept and that every recording ever made is kept there. And so he knows where to go look for the recordings, and he is trying to get access to the recordings to do searches for big events.
got it. So, okay, I think for maybe people listening and watching who may not get what you just said, this may help, understand it. So, like, I think it was last summer, there was like a little submersible hand, whatever, right, that went down and people perished, right? It was like a tour thing, right? And
Going down to
I
the Titanic.
yeah, going down to the Titanic, exactly. And I believe when they were doing the search, I remember hearing about in the news they were trying to find like the sounds like files or something that sensors were recording when the submersible collapsed, and that there would be some sort of sound from that, and they were trying to find, pinpoint its location based off that sound. Are these the type of sensors you're talking about?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, that's what I thought of. That helps me clarify. I think that'll help people too understand. Wow, that's fascinating because you're right. I mean, they're able to right. Oh, wow, that's fascinating for
I
sure.
mean, it is so sensitive. Probably almost everybody who cares about this knows the name of this system, but I won't say the name of the system. The
No, I
Navy's
don't want to say
really
it either.
the
Yeah,
Navy's really peculiar about this. Except Tim Gallaudet told audiences that they found that sound about the submersible crushing, and they are so weird about secrecy. They did not tell the public until days later They
Yeah, I remember
knew it
that.
had crushed.
Yeah.
They knew it had almost instantly, but you
Yeah.
had to go through all of the processes you have to go through to declassify it enough that they could tell the story, and it took days.